is part one of the national.
Somebody needs to meet.
Cool. Well, on the third floor.
Okay, so last Henry gave us a quick introduction to Bill. But we didn't have a chance to go through it line by line, so that's what we're gonna do now.
Tony, can you invite me again? For some reason, the link aren't working.
Eligibility name here. You don't know,
Oh, wow.
expanding eligibility. So like who can receive grants or what can receive grants essentially.
Ed, I get. Or am I? Oh, never mind. Don't listen to me. I'm not in leadership.
Is there a question?
It was mine. What are we doing?
550.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, I think we're all set. All right, thanks, Mike.
So this is Michael Gray, Legislative Counsel. The bill in front of you is an act relating to expanding eligibility under the Local Foods Grant Program. The Farm to School program has a couple of different branches, one of which is that they have a grant program that they use to award funds to schools that have an interest in farm to school and agricultural education. And then those funds can be used for various different types of eligible activities. What the bill would do would do a couple of things. It would first be clear that these grants are to focus on education of children regarding farming and nutrition. And you'll see that on page 1, section 1, line 16. In addition, right now, in order to get a grant, your school or your school district or a consortium of school districts needs to be the one that applies for the grant. So on page 2, line 1, a change is being made that a teacher within a school can apply for a grant on their own. And that's largely in part to what the intent of the changes for the eligible activities are about. Because currently there's equipment you can get a grant for equipment or training to increase the use of local foods, but it doesn't say to provide for education. So if you wanted materials for within your classroom in order to do farm to school, like a hot stove or a refrigerator or some other equipment to be used in providing education around farming. It's not there in subdivision 1 where equipment is specifically authorized. So what page 2, line 6 and 7 would do would be allow for the funding of equipment to educate children regarding farming instead of just to increase use of local foods. And then in subdivision 2, which is another eligible activity, would then fund items including local food products, gardening supplies, kitchenwares, cooking equipment, etc., that will help educators to use hands-on educational techniques to teach children about nutrition and farm to school connection. So a specific reference to in-classroom cooking and kitchenware equipment to provide for education. Page 2, line 18 is really just to clarify that the professional development and technical assistance grants are to educate students about farming, nutrition, and farm to school connections. And you have a similar change. Oh, no, that's it. So that is what this bill would do, to increase or focus the assistance on educating children regarding farming and nutrition, increase the eligibility for the grants to include equipment for educating children regarding farming, allow for things like kitchenwares and cooking equipment to be funded, and to allow a teacher within a school, not just the school district, or school, to apply for a grant. I will note that there's still the condition that the secretary has to determine that there's significant interest in the school community for farm to school before making an award. So there has to be, basically, they look for some structural support of a farm to school program. So this individual teacher can still apply for a grant, get that grant for in-classroom equipment, et cetera, for educational farming and nutrition. But the school has to have some support for that. They don't have to apply for the grant, but they basically have to have some administrative support for that.
Questions? Yes.
Is teacher defined? And just because, I'm thinking of volunteers, parents, somebody who comes in and teaches an elective, like, does it cover all those sort of possibilities?
Currently, the language doesn't have that definition.
Administrators.
It could say, there is a definition in Title 16, I think. And I don't think it says teacher. I think it's something like an employee of the school which provides instruction or something like that. I could look at Title 16 and see if there's a definition to cross-reference.
Just to piggyback on that, I just wonder if the committee would want to consider additions in addition to teacher, do we want to make individual school food service folks eligible to apply, school nurses or nutritionists? And then even a conversation about, is there a world in which a farmer would apply for a grant that was specifically to help the farm to school education at a.
There are other grants that are available to farmers underneath the farm to school program. I don't have the full charges. It's called a farm assistance program. They work with farmers to help them increase their market through selling their products to schools. Work with distributors that sell products to basically get the farmers' products into the school.
Yeah, I wonder if there's an interest in sort of helping this attack the problem that we talk about, where there seems to be that disconnect between farms selling their products to schools and schools using those products, but maybe not connecting that to the farm to school the sort of education about farming piece.
That's a good idea. I'm wondering what we collectively might know about other instances where a teacher or any of the other people who are just listed is able to apply for a state grant. So rather than the district officially, but an individual, and whether there are other examples of that right now.
I'll need to look into that. I don't know the answer to that.
Something that comes to mind is like sometimes a teacher will be, and this is not something I know for sure, but just a suggestion, sometimes a teacher will be an advisor for a club. And is that a situation in which if the club wants to sort of go for a grant or something, for a trip or something like that, the teacher could be that.
John?
And like, I just wondered how a school works now as far as, I assume certain teachers, say a science teacher, do they apply saying as representing, Danville Elementary?
So right now, it has to be the school, the district, or the consortium. And I believe they basically have a contact on the application for the person that applies for the school.
Joseph?
Well, I'm think I'm getting ahead of myself, but the grant could be to fund equipment and resources training. The resource could be the farmer to come in and talk about farming and how their farm helps feed that school without sort of circumventing the farmer necessarily being the one to get the grant, but being the one they can use the grant on. But I think it would be great. Really like Mike's point that if we could include them as someone who might want to apply for this grant specifically for the school, that could be really powerful.
So this bill doesn't, cost anything in the sense that there's no appropriation bill.
No, it would just expand somewhat who could get a grant and the eligible activities for the grant that is already funded in the agency's base budget.
And is that the $500,000 or is that? No, that was a different number, I think.
This is typically not that
Yeah.
high of an amount. It's around $150,000 to $100,000.
Okay. So in that area, all right. And that's in the base budget, that's your recollection?
Yeah, farm to school is in the base budget.
Yeah.
This is part of farm to school.
Okay. All right, other thoughts?
I'd be interested in testimony from Farm to School.
Yeah, I think we need to have them come in and maybe give us just an update on what they've been doing over the past year, what programs they've funded, what kinds of programs and.
Well, Abby would be the one to start with on that, or whoever's running farm to school at the agency right now. It
Yeah.
used to be Abby. I'm not sure if she is,
I think, yeah, I'm not sure. Okay.
because she's the one that approves all the application.
Representative.
I agree that that perspective will be very important, but I also think that the people who are like on the ground doing the in-school work, but also are very invested in the policy piece of Farm to School, like this sub cohort that meets like on a month-to-month basis with Farm to School. I think, someone in that group would also be great because they're a little bit closer to, the actual implementation of these things.
Yeah, good. If you want to.
I can do some research.
Yes,
Yeah.
good. John?
I'm just wondering, are there restrictions on funding at all as far as matches and things like that go, like?
There's no match requirement in this program. There are restrictions on any state grant. Administrative Bulletin 3.0 has a lot of hoops. And basically, it's about accountability and reporting on the use of your grant.
While you're here, since this isn't a terribly long bill, and since I think we've got time, could we just go back to the top and just quickly go through not just the changes, but what the existing program is?
Sure. So farm to school, the Rose O. McLaughlin Farm to School program, or technically, has multiple components. One of those components is a grant program to local schools. And it currently is to help schools develop farm to school programs that will sustain relationships with local farmers and producers, enrich the educational experience of students, and improve the health of Vermont children. It doesn't actually say educate regarding farming and nutrition. So that is the proposal that is being added to that. This program really is about farming and the nutrition of farm or local food. And then in B, There's the current authority for who can apply for a grant. And it's a school district, a consortium, a registered licensed childcare provider, or an organization administering a farm to school program. But it's not a teacher. So the teacher cannot apply on their own. So this would allow the teacher to apply on her own, his or her own. And then there are 3 eligible categories for use of the grant. It's to fund equipment, resources, training, and materials that will help. And it's currently increased use of local foods. But it would be proposed to mean to educate children regarding farming and increase the use of local foods. And then the second category right now funds items including food products, gardening supplies, field trips, etc., that helps educators have a hands-on educational techniques. But there's nothing there for if you need to cook, if you need to cool, if you need to mix, there's in the provision of your educational instruction. And then last is a professional development authority. The school can look to get their farm to school technical service providers, their teachers, their child nutrition personnel, assistance to basically get training in developing farm to school programs. And then last is to fund a technical assistance or support strategies to increase participation in federal child nutrition programs. That kind of is irrelevant because you passed universal school meals.
Can I just have you go back to number 1 there on the previous page? By adding educate children regarding farming and are we saying that the grants would need to do that? So it's not an or.
Right now it's conjunctive that it would be about both.
So the type of grants that were funded previously might not qualify anymore if they didn't.
If they didn't have a branch that's related to educating regarding farming.
Okay. And I don't know whether anybody wants to speak to that, whether that was the intent or whether we might consider having it be an or. John.
I was just wondering if curriculum could come into this. So last year we had this Janice Ball come in from Woodstock, who's designed a curriculum. If that was something a teacher at another school said, I want to import that, get some training, and resources to do that, that potentially could be.
I mean, you could amend sub 4, which really is kind of irrelevant now since the viability of sustainable meal programs has been funded by the General Assembly. And you could say that it would be technical assistance or support strategies for developing curriculum to assist in the education of children regarding farming and nutrition or something like that.
I'm gonna stay away from that word.
No, I think that's good. That's part of the intent, really is, the basis, I was kind of hearing from educators or one educator in particular that was basically had the knowledge, the ambition, the passion to do this, and the administration was telling them, well, you kind of need to figure out the fund, we've got too much going on, or we don't have the funding, to stand up something like that. So if you can do that and kind of prove that there's an interest or show us that it's a good thing, then maybe we would adopt it. But to jump into something more, on a more administrative level is probably not gonna happen. So the feeling was, putting teacher in there, that somebody could kind of branch out if they, because it felt like from last year, I think it was last year, a couple of years ago's testimony of folks in these roles that they're kind of a lone person that has the want to do it and they have to kind of prove, and it seems like it's such a tall ladder to climb to prove themselves that if we can kind of expedite that or help people that want to stand up programs or create curriculum, then maybe then it would get in there better, but so I think curriculum pieces.
Wouldn't that fall under section 1, fund equipment, resources, training and materials? Yeah, because I'm sort of seeing like someone doing like a whole curriculum packet.
Right.
For different grades, and that to me feels like resources and materials.
That is why I think talking to Abby about what she funds underneath these eligible categories would be helpful.
I think it's just gonna be important for us to talk about what that section 4, subsection D, about the secretary determining there's significant interest in the school community means in the context of a single teacher being eligible to apply.
And this refers to the Secretary of
Agriculture.
Okay. Okay. Charles.
I think it's a good idea, but is there any, I don't know how to word it, any protection towards taxpayers? Because taxpayers are already overburdened, especially with taxpayers for education.
So it wouldn't, to my knowledge, affect the education property tax rate, because this is a specific grant for these specific activities. There's already supposed to be somebody there to implement those activities, so that cost of that individual is already incorporated into the school's budget. So I wouldn't see anything, and the cost of the grant is in the Agency of Agriculture's budget. It's not in the school's budget. So I don't see an effect on the education property tax.
Would it make sense to add language, even though it's not, I'm sure, illegal, but in education world, I don't know what happens where it says like you may use these grants in coordination with, say, school funds or even not-for-profit, like club fundraising groups. So if it was a field trip to, some famous, to Cornell, say, to look at farming practices there, could you use a grant plus parent, donations plus, a small bit of a school's budget?
I think that's going to really depend on the terms of the grant and what the grant says about its use, and whether it can be commingled with other funds. So I don't know, beyond the default terms and conditions for grants, I don't know what conditions that the agency puts on these grants.
You'll have a hand up. Okay. I stopped you there, Mike, so I think I interrupted you at the top of page 3.
Okay. As represented, right, actually, no, page 3, line 4. This is a directive to the secretary in consultation with the interested parties to adopt procedures related to the content of the grant application and criteria for making awards. Then you get to the provision on page 3, line 10, sub D, about the secretary still needs to determine that there's interest in the school community before making an award and give priority to those that are developing farm to school connections and education. And that indicated willingness to make changes to their child nutrition programs to increase student access and participation. I really don't know how the agency's dealing with that now with universal meals, if that's even really a consideration anymore, and that are making progress toward the implementation of the Vermont School Wellness Policy Guidelines developed by the agency. And those are probably been updated, so you may want to talk to them about if there's an updated guidelines to reference. No award shall be greater than 20% of the total annual amount available for grant, except that a grant may exceed the 20% amount for farm to school service providers, those that help coordinate farm to school activities. I think Representative Cole referenced the cohort and the organizations that those people on the cohort work for. They can get a grant from this program. And also school districts or consortiums that were subject to the Act 153 basic merger requirement. That's probably obsolete right now. But those were up until July of 2019. I didn't feel comfortable striking that without knowing what grants are out there and what schools would still be eligible, if any. And then the act takes effect on July 1, 2024.
Just, thinking about schools too, this includes approved independent schools, but it also say like Rice High School.
It does not define what is a school. You could go to the definitions in Title 16 where there are distinctions between an independent school and a public school. This does provide funding for daycare facilities, and that was added not that long ago, maybe 5-6 years ago.
You described it as a consortium or a group that is working, and Representative Cole had mentioned it first. How was that established?
There are organizations that work for local food distribution development, whether it's in schools or it's elsewhere. And they have this group that meets together through the Agency of Agriculture to try to support farm to school programs in the state.
The agency convenes it. That's the right word.
I think they originally convened, and I think it's kind of taken on a little bit of viability of its own.
Their monthly meetings, the second Wednesday of every month. And it's, different stakeholders from different aspects of the integration.
Who do you have that for? Who are the stakeholders, for example?
Well, like EVM Extension is, someone who works there is one of the facilitators for this. Let's see.
Are you talking about Vermont Feed, or are you talking?
So Vermont Farm to School and Early Childhood Network, that I can't remember their exact relationship with Vermont
Right.
Feed, but it's like those two together. And then there's what's really interesting and could be valuable for us is that there are different subgroups within those committees which talk about like 5 different pillars: ease of use of the farm to school program, research and evaluation of the farm to school program. This one is School for You, Henry, too, demonstrating the educational value of farm to school. Local purchasing is a whole nother subcommittee. And policy is a whole nother subcommittee. So like these, I feel like they spend a lot of time in each of these. I think so we could use them.
Okay, good. Any other questions for Mike or anything about the language? Thank you, Mike. And we, I think, may have already started reaching out to some potential witnesses. Henry, who,
Suzanne from, Danville is one that Sonia reached out, or I reached out. I think she's hopefully gonna be available. She's potentially somebody that would benefit from this. She's a cooking teacher, I guess. There's a better name for it probably than that. But she's also a journalist and been very involved in the food world for a long time and has a lot of interest in standing up programs at Danville in particular, and knows other people that do, it sounded like that.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, then, Sonia, we can also, I'll check in with you. We can see if we can get Abby, if it's still Abby, to come in, and then if you've got some possible names, and then if there are if anyone else raises their hand that they'd like to be part of the conversation too, I think that would be useful.
If we get Janice back, would be great to hear.
Yeah, and just have, update. Yeah. Okay. H603. We're going to, we have one more farm that wanted to testify, and I think they're not available this afternoon unless you've heard otherwise.
You know, I have 2 farms that like this.
We have 2 farms, okay. I think that the timing, there isn't really, in fact, I think we all think being equal, want to not vote this out today. We'll do it tomorrow, tentatively. And let's hear from a couple of the farmers who are excited about testifying. I think that's not a bad thing. And if they're not available today, then we can plug them in tomorrow. And the more voices, the better here.
You said that maybe they didn't want to, but we didn't hear anything about like the food safety concerns, which I felt like that was the whole reason in the beginning, which I'm not saying that you should, but you reached out, or we've reached out to the agency as far as that side of it goes.
Yeah, we contacted the Department of Health.
Okay.
And invited them to come in and testify. And they, at first, I think, were not sure why we would be interested in their testimony.
Okay.
And then I think, it might not be obvious.
Yeah.
And when we said that the Agency of Agriculture had thought it might be a good idea, they then they got together and decided, no, they didn't need to. So they don't have a concern.
That's great.
Is, I think, the takeaway that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that was the only, I guess that was the only thing I had ever, and maybe it was just rumor, that I had heard the reasoning for keeping the bird whole was traceability, if there was something wrong with the meat or whatever, if you separate things out, but that's, if they're not concerned, that's forever.
But in the meantime, were there other questions?
Certainly.
Yes.
Yes. So it had been mentioned with the agency's testimony that they were interested in possibly creating some kind of registration process for the need to ensure proper labeling. And I was under the impression that with the existing language in Title IX, that those were already requirements for the exemptions. Would it be redundant to add that into this current piece of legislation?
By Title IX, do you mean the Code of Federal Regulations?
Or the Consumer Protection Fund? Federally,
Federal.
yeah, federally.
So both the federal rules and statute and the state statute require the product to be labeled in a certain way and require name and some disclaimer information on it in order for it to be sold legally. So, and the agency wants a registry so they can check on the labeling?
I think you'd have to ask the agency.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that likely that was the reason, and for record keeping in general.
there are registration requirements for some of the other state slaughter provisions such as on-farm slaughter. The agency has had trouble in getting those farmers to actually register, similar to raw milk. But I mean, a requirement for that would be a policy decision. It's not mandated by federal regs.
But the labeling.
Labeling,
and record Keeping.
record keeping,
is-
yes,
Yes. Okay,
yes. But reporting to the state agency is not, I mean, and the federal rules wouldn't address that because not every state has its own state agency that does inspection. Many states just rely on the USDA to do it. And so why would the rule say you have to report to your state agency when, say, in Wyoming, it's the USDA that's always going to do it.
right.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I just think if what they're asking for, if the purpose is for labeling and record keeping purposes, and those are already required, I think we've been talking in this committee a lot about how effective it is to add things to statute without additional enforcement capabilities. And so if it's just sort of an additional burden of registration with no kind of, when there's already acknowledgement that the people who are going to do such things are going to do them because they're already required to, and perhaps some will fail to do so, but they are already required to anyway. It doesn't feel to me like it's particularly good use of our time to add, sort of additional duplicative burden when there's not sort of an enforcement piece.
there is enforcement. So the agency's default enforcement authority in chapter 1 would apply to this program.
I guess without additional enforcement capacity.
Oh, without capacity, yeah. Understood.
And adding more requirements without also adding more capacity.
Doesn't it? When the requirements are already getting at things that are required, and that anybody sort of acting in good faith should already, and we've heard testimony that they are already.
When we heard from you originally, I think we talked about the turkeys were mentioned. And we haven't really talked about turkeys again. I don't know that anybody feels there's a demand for turkey parks the way there is for parted chickens, and maybe that's why it hasn't come up, but turkeys would be covered by this.
Yes, it's the little bit in flux. You're going to see the miscellaneous ag bill that's going to propose a change. And what they're proposing to do is to go to the federal definition or So the federal definition defines poultry as any domesticated bird. And then it's parentheses, chickens, turkeys, ducks, quail. It lists out all what the agency is proposing in their miscellaneous bill is to just define it as any domesticated bird, which I think that's too ambiguous because there's reference to domestic pets in Title VI and in Title 20, which the agency used to enforce, which might create ambiguity about what is being. I've recommended that they define domestic bird as defined in 9 CFR 381.1, which would mean the domesticated bird parentheses with the list of the birds. And so that it's clear. The other thing is there's another definition in state statute. It's any bird that's dead or alive that's being prepared for slaughter. That's another one that or processing, I think it is. And so you could probably play with that definition a little bit, but I'd like just, you want to be consistent with the USDA poultry program, just use their definition.
Right, that's a good approach. So ducks
Ducks, yes,
are in the news also.
yes.
Ducks would also qualify here.
I mean, I can probably call up,
Quail, I mean, quail is gonna feel left out if you don't.
What about pheasant?
yes.
Say goose yet.
Nobody said.
Oh, jeez.
So it's chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese, guineas, rat tights, so that's your emu, or swabs.
Sorry.
Pigeon.
So, and that's it, that's just an instructive parenthetical. You still have that whole domesticated bird, and that's just there. So
There are a lot of emus grown in Vermont that.
there used to be an emu farm up in the island.
Oh.
There was?
Yeah, there's. So you're required to deliver an entire carcass, like,
Right, yeah.
is that busy?
You do with an emu neck, my God.
And Mike, wasn't there a commercial pheasant farm that supplied restaurants?
Yeah, and a quail farm, Katortnik quail or whatever, however it's pronounced, Katortnik. Well, I don't think the quail farm's in operation anymore.
But those sort of game birds are considered domesticated?
Yeah,
Is that what-
that would be,
So they're all covered as written here.
yeah. So someone asked me about rabbits would qualify, and so a few years ago, the miscellaneous ag bill, rabbits were defined as livestock. So they were being covered under the meat inspection program, not under poultry inspection. But the federal Meat Inspection Act didn't cover rabbits. So the agency asked for rabbits to be taken out of the definition of livestock. They're not currently defined as an animal subject to inspection for slaughter right now, which is why you might hear, oh, they're exempt. It's not that they're exempt, they're just not covered by slaughter inspection. If you were going to sell them, you would still need to comply with FDA requirements for adulterated food, because no food can be sold that's adulterated. And that means that it has to be slaughtered in sanitary conditions, which likely means if you're going to sell interstate, that it has to be in a facility that meets the custom facility requirements.
Likely.
I mean, I've seen different things. I've seen what just today I looked at it, and some of the guidance is there are no requirements. And some of the guidance is, yes, there's no slaughter inspection requirement, but there's still health inspection. There's still health standards. And so you still need to slaughter that animal in a way that's sanitary. The best way to do that is in a custom facility.
So the federal law that is allowing us to take this step does not address rabbits, and our definition of poultry does not include rabbits.
Right, so neither of the federal laws, the Poultry Products Inspection Act or the Federal Meat Inspection Act, address rabbits. So for consistency with those USDA laws, you don't need to include rabbits in slaughter inspection. But consistent with the Federal Food and Drug Act and the sale of food, that food, which is anything that's fit for human or animal consumption, has to be sold in a way that's unadulterated. And it has to be prepared in sanitary conditions. Any food, unadulterated, prepared in sanitary conditions.
So if I'm a rabbit or meat farmer, can I take rabbits either whole or you know, the whole animal or harvested rabbits to a.
Yeah, I think you can sell, I think you can sell to a restaurant. And I think you could sell to a farmer's market, but you probably want to check with the agency before you do that.
Right?
If we wanted to clear this up for rabbit farmers everywhere, is there a good way, is there a good way to do that, given the federal ambiguity? Like, is there a way to, what would be our path for that at the state level?
So you wouldn't want to require them to do anything for inspection, correct?
I mean, I guess that's a conversation that I would want to maybe have a little more rabbit research under my belt, but so if we reach the conclusion that we wanted to treat them the same way as poultry farm, you know. Is
But
there a
these
way
poultry
to?
farms are.
I
already
think you
rabbits,
could,
right?
I think you could do that because it's not, it's, the feds don't dictate how to do slaughter for rabbits. It's just that they have to be unadulterated and slaughtered in sanitary or prepared in sanitary condition. I think if you wanted to set a standard for the slaughter of rabbits, you could do that. Just like you set a 5,000 bird limit for poultry when the feds don't have that.
Just quickly, so poultry is not livestock?
No, poultry is fowl, right?
But bees are livestock.
Rabbits are livestock.
Bees are an agricultural product. And then if you look at the definition under the RAPs, you will see things like bees and cultured trout. So it's a bit of a strain to get certain things in under the RAPs.
So circling back to poultry.
What's that?
Circling back to poultry, we feel that the current definition in 603 is the definition that is existing federally for
So
what classifies as.
the agency is actually has already proposed a change to the definition of poultry under slaughter inspection. You haven't seen it yet because I just got it back from the editors yesterday. And I had a question about it, and I had a question specifically about changing the definition of poultry, domesticated birds. So right now it's any domesticated bird, whether live or dead. And they want to just make it any domesticated bird, period. I really don't like that because in the pet shop bill or pet shop law, which the agency has authority over, a domestic bird is a parrot or rat type. And I don't know if you want that kind of ambiguity there. Just saying a domestic means domesticated bird as defined in 9 CFR 381.1, that brings in that parenthetical list and provides instruction about what is actually covered. And there's less ambiguity with whether or not you can slaughter your parrots.
As he says with the deadpan face.
Don't forget about your parakeets.
Certainly don't want that ambiguity.
It just feels to me like a domesticated bird is a pet and poultry is like a crop in a way. Like, yeah, I mean, some people do keep chickens as pets, but I just think, to me, a domesticated bird isn't something you're raising for slaughter. It's something you're farming. But I mean, whatever that word would be. Yeah.
But remember that they were being consistent with the feds. The feds say domesticated bird, but then they have the list, which provides instruction about what that domesticated bird are. And you don't see parrots or et cetera there. It's the birds that are, you know, essentially used for.
Can we add that list to this bill? Because those are all,
Sure, you could just mirror this. Or what I wanted to do is just cross-reference this site.
okay.
Say, as defined in 381.1.
So I'm sorry, are you saying you wanted to do that in 603 or in the,
Well, they're proposing the change in miscellaneous ag. You could do it in 603 if you wanted to.
I think one of the beauties of this 603 bill is that there's very little happening other than deleting a phrase 3 times, and unless there's.
But anyone who's going to report has to be prepared for what is poultry, and you have to stand up and say it's a domesticated bird, and then explain that.
That
wait.
person is.
I'm gonna interrogate you.
I'm ready.
Wicked prepared.
Don't mess with it.
Domesticated.
No parrots.
But if you think this
Parrot parts.
requires more conversation, we can do that. But I think if as the bill report, you're comfortable doing that, be nice not to mess with the bill anymore. John?
I just, a backwards way to possibly meet this, I was thinking is, does the USDA allow you to eat eggs from all those poultry? So like you wouldn't eat a pigeon egg or a songbird egg, but I think all those seem like potentially you could eat the eggs, right?
Yeah, but you can eat squab eggs, and squab is a pigeon,
But that's under the poultry right now.
right?
Of course, your pet store, you wouldn't be able, you're not allowed to eat those eggs.
I would need to look and see. Don't know what the federal egg law says about, right? I don't know.
I don't think eggs have anything to do with it.
But there must be laws on what.
If,
I feel like we're just going down a weird path right now. Maybe.
Why aren't you so funny? Was there what?
Now we see Mike does so much.
they don't have a standard of identity for what is an egg. It's just the food commonly known as eggs.
But eggs don't have anything to do with this. Precisely, there are no eggs in it.
Yeah, we.
There are, dead birds
Got it, chicken
In
ball.
whole and in parts.
and no eggs.
There are no eggs.
Okay. Those who are
Did we
interested in
just
eggs
waste
can continue to pursue that on their own. Why don't we pause, take a break? And so then the plan will be tomorrow,